Hello everyone and welcome to Radical Thinker, the place where we challenge Western media narratives. Today is Saturday, April 25th, 2026, and we are entering day 57 of the American and Israeli war imposed on the Islamic Republic of Iran. According to tanker trackers, Iran exported more oil in April so far than in the entire month of March. This basically shows how ineffective it's the American naval blockade of the Persian Gulf and especially of the Strait of Hormuz if Iran is managing to export more oil now during the naval blockade than it did before the naval blockade was imposed by the Americans some weeks ago. Donald Trump is doubling down and he told reporters the United States is in no rush to end the war with Iran, stating he will know it's over when he feels it in his bones. He also issued a shoot and kill order to the US Navy for any Iranian boat continuing to drop mines in the Strait of Hormuz, vowing to triple mine-sweeping efforts. In return, the Iranian authorities announced that the Iranian foreign minister will not hold any negotiations with the Trump regime in Islamabad and will merely convey Iran's considerations and views regarding the end of the war to the Pakistani side. This meeting is a response to General Asim Munir's trip to Tehran. This comes after the announcement that Iran's foreign minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi will begin a regional tour visiting Islamabad, Muscat and Moscow for bilateral consultations and discussions on current regional developments. The Iranian media was mocking the Americans, saying that Trump's statements to send a delegation to Islamabad is desperate and Araghchi won't meet with Witkoff or Jared Kushner. They are saying this in reply to a statement posted by Donald Trump in which he said that he's going to send the trio with Witkoff, Kushner and J.D. Vance again to Islamabad, but the Islamic Republic seems to be very determined not to enter into another round of negotiations as long as the Americans are stubborn and are continuing to impose a naval blockade on Iran. The precondition for participation in another round of negotiations would be that the naval blockade ends and that the Americans are going to stop acting in such a way that can only lead to further escalation and further tension between the sides present in this conflict. An Iranian journalist in Islamabad said, "We have no idea why Kushner and Witkoff are being sent to Islamabad. A meeting with them is not on the foreign ministry's agenda. Furthermore, Araghchi will likely already have departed Pakistan by the time they arrive." According to some Iranian officials, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has forbidden negotiations. According to Iranian officials, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has forbidden negotiations with the United States under the current circumstances. If so, it means that Iran understands now that another round of negotiations would be useless, it will not be fruitful, and that we are getting closer and closer to the resumption of the hostilities. The Iranian Foreign Ministry tries to make a last-ditch effort to prevent this. Of course, this is their role as diplomats, trying to find probably some ways of bridging the gaps between them and the Americans. But in my opinion, the things are already set in motion and the Americans have used these negotiations as a pretext for gaining some time in order for them to prepare for the second phase of the war. I see the Israelis very excited these days. Their media is continuously speaking about how ready they are to resume the war against Iran and the fact that they are waiting for the green light from their American allies. So the more time passes, it becomes less and less probable for an agreement to be reached in the following days. According to some national polls taken inside Iran, 66% of Iranians consider Iran to be the winner of this war, 87.2% were satisfied with the armed forces response, 57.7% believe that the United States is more in need of a ceasefire than Iran. According to the same poll, 49% of Iranians are not agreeing with Iran participating in any ongoing negotiations with the Americans, 8.6% say very little, so somehow they are agreeing, 16.6% somehow they are also agreeing, 19.1% is the percentage of Iranians who are agreeing with Iran participating in negotiations, and 10.4% say very much, completely agree with negotiating with the Americans. This shows that a large part of the Iranian people don't think that negotiations are suitable now. They think that Iran should continue the war, although the war is going to have its destructive effects on the Iranian people, but they are ready to take the risks and they think that war now is more preferable to negotiations because Iran was controlling the escalation ladder and they had prepared for every move that the Americans and the Israelis wanted to make. What is even more important from this poll, it's the fact that the majority of the Iranians, 85.7%, are disapproving limiting Iran's missile program, which is one of the biggest demands coming from the Americans. Free passage through the Strait Strait of Hormuz as a condition to end the war, 73.7% disapprove, and abandoning the resistance axis for an end to the war, 68.1% disapprove. It becomes obvious that the Iranian authorities are under great pressure coming from the Iranian people not to give in to the Americans during the negotiations. This is of course a dead start for any type of discussion with the Americans, because the current administration in Washington doesn't seem to understand what negotiations mean, and therefore it seems very unlikely that any type of deal could be reached in the near future. At the beginning of the war, Trump and also the Israelis were doubling down not only on direct strikes on Iran, but also on using different types of separatist groups like the Kurds to wreak havoc inside Iran and to try to break the borders and incite a civil war, which would have eventually led to the Balkanization of Iran. Among these groups is the Kurdish PAK, a separatist group which has strongly criticized Trump recently in a statement for not supporting separatist groups against Iran's attacks. It is not fair and should not be that the United States of America considers the Kurds and Peshmerga as its partners during war and anti-terrorism operations, and President Trump declares support for them, but during the ceasefire merely observes Tehran's missile and drone attacks and the Iraqi groups under its command against us. The PAK is saying out loudly what many separatist Kurdish groups are thinking after Trump betrayed the Kurds in Syria, that these Kurdish groups are feeling now left behind by the Americans, and they are rightfully feeling that the Americans have used them for a number of years, and now when it was the time for these groups to get their part of the prey, nothing happened. On contrary, they have been left on their own, and especially these Kurdish separatist groups from Iraq have been hit very, very hard by the Iranian armed forces, but also by Iraqi Shia groups which are allies of Iran. This will make less and less probable the scenario in which separatist groups, be it the Kurds, being the Baluch, being Azeris or other groups, would take part in this conflict on the American side, because now these separatist groups, although they have their own regional agenda, they are clearly seeing that Iran is very, very strong, and the Americans have played them, have used them, and now they are not willing to do anything in order to support and to protect these groups. Iran is hitting these separatist Kurdish groups in Iraq without the government in Baghdad saying anything, because also the government in Baghdad is somehow fed up with Kurdish separatism, especially with everything that has happened in the Iraqi Kurdistan for a number of years since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, and therefore Iran will not feel any type of pressure and will continue to strike against any group which might try to disrupt its internal security. The important lesson to be learned from this is that Kurds in general are not learning. I don't know what happens with them, because otherwise Kurds are very nice people, and as a community overall they are also very smart people, but when it comes to make bad alliances with bad actors like the United States or with Israel, they never learned. They have always been played, especially by the Americans, since the 80s when Saddam Hussein was supported by the Americans, when the United States provided him with chemical weapons which Saddam used on the Kurds in Halabja. Then in 1991 the Americans made the Kurds believe that they are going to support a Kurdish insurrection against Saddam after the end of the Kuwait War, which didn't happen. The Americans once again betrayed the Kurds. Then during the war with ISIS in Iraq and also in Syria, things got much more complex. The Syrian Kurds betrayed their current homeland and tried to gain as much land as possible and to break themselves from the Syrian Arab Republic. They fought against ISIS, they collaborated with the Americans, they did some really nasty things to Arabs in Syria and Iraq. And when the tides turned in 2024 and Ahmad al-Shara and his ISIS minions took power in Damascus, the Kurds were once again left behind by the Americans. They were betrayed, and the ridiculous thing is that Donald Trump at the beginning of the war against Iran was expecting to use these separatist Kurdish groups, especially those present in Iraq, to break the border with Iran and to fight on the ground the American and the Israeli war for them. But as soon as the Iranian missiles and drones started to fall on these groups in Iraq, they started to quickly understand that for the Americans the Kurds are just cannon fodder and useful minions in the war against Iran. It's insane to think that some Kurds are truly believing that this could become one day reality, to have their own country, Kurdistan. The Turks, the Iranians, the Iraqis, and to a certain extent the new regime in Damascus would never accept for this to happen. This outcome becomes now less and less probable because Iran emerges, as everyone can see, much more stronger from this conflict with the Americans and the Israelis. They have shown that they have the power to resist in a war imposed on them them by two nuclear powers, at a certain point I think that some Kurds will need to rethink their ideology and their role in the region. And if they want to continue to be the pawns of neo-colonial powers from the West, like the Americans, or if they want to continue to be the foot soldiers for Israel, for the Zionist entity, okay, they can continue on this path. But as we can see since 2011, when the Syrian civil war started, the Kurds have fought for other people's interests, thinking that they are fighting for their own agenda, and they lost a lot. Now they have been betrayed once more by the Americans and the West. The same West which some years ago was creating nice and glamorous stories about Kurdish women which are bravely fighting against barbaric ISIS fighters, which was a reality. Many Kurdish women in these groups fought bravely against ISIS terrorists and other ISIS-affiliated extremist groups. But this cannot erase the fact that the Kurds have done nasty things to the Syrians and also to the Iraqi people, and played an important role in the destabilization of Syria and also in weakening Iraq, especially after the American invasion of 2003. And sooner or later, this type of games are going to be settled. The cards will be put once again on the table, and the Kurds once again are going to be on the losing side. We are seeing this happening these days in Syria, with Kurds losing influence, losing territories to the regime in Damascus, and being also betrayed by the same Americans which are pushing them once more to fight now against the Iranians. A path that, if they are going to pursue, would be suicidal for the Kurds in the region. In my opinion, the Kurds should rethink their relations with their neighbors, especially with Iran. The Kurds in the Iraqi Kurdistan should understand that culturally, ethnically, and so on and so forth, they are part of the Iranian people, and maybe they should change their perspectives. I know that there are some very extremist Kurdish nationalist groups which claim to be part of the Medes, of the ancient people of Medes, other crazies which are thinking that they are pure and they crossed thousands of years of history without getting mixed with other people. Of course, this is completely unrealistic and has no connection into real scientific history. I think they will gain much more if they are going to change their attitude and if they are going to gradually give up on this type of separatist mindset, which has brought them only misery and suffering. And the most important lesson for the Kurds to learn is that putting all their eggs in the Western basket is not going to bring them nowhere. The West has always sold the people of the Middle East, not only the Kurds. They have sold the Arabs, they promised them independence and that the Middle East will thrive and everyone will be happy. They gained the emergence of the Zionist state in occupied Palestine, the creation of some nutcase countries with extremists like Saudi Arabia. They got their borders being drawn by the Sykes-Picot Agreement, an agreement whose effects we are seeing even today in the ethnical and religious conflicts between, for example, the Lebanese people, where the Shias in the south are fighting to preserve the Lebanese territory against Israeli invasion, while some Sunnis there and also some Christian, especially Maronites, are cheering up for the Israelis to destroy Hezbollah and to take over basically the territory of their country, which is insane to think about, but this is how people there are thinking. Some of them, due to their sectarian mindset, find Israel to be closer than their own citizens of another sect. Past and present events are showing the excessive need for a change in the mentality of the people from the Middle East, a change when it comes to sectarian views, to how they are seeing their role on the global scale, to how they are interacting with international powers, of how their leaders and even some communities in the Middle East are seeing Israel. I think there is a strong need for a reset and for the people to rethink their role if they want to survive the 21st century, and not only to survive it, but also to become successful nations. What we saw in the 21st century, it was a complete disaster for the people from the Middle East. Of course, a big part of the disaster was provoked by the influence coming from the West, but also we should not deny that another part of this disaster is the creation of the people of the Middle East, of their passivity, of their sectarianism, of the way that they are seeing things and how they are acting in certain situations and in certain scenarios.